Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Kimberly Almazan, and I am a lawyer at Withers Bergman. We represent a lot of artists and dealers and galleries and auction houses and everything in between. And I'm here with Christine Duval, who is a curator and a gallery director. She's been one for over 20 years, both in LA and in San Francisco. And she used to focus primarily on contemporary Chinese art, and she does a lot of things still, but now she is focusing on sort of the correlation between art and technology.
Correct.
I believe. Mm-hmm. And then we also have Jan here. Jan is a very successful artist and an educator and a curator, and Jan's work has been exhibited internationally, and it's in collections like the Fine Arts Museum here in San Francisco and the New York Public Library print collection.
That's true.
Yes. So we wanted to get started today and just sort of talk a little bit about the rights that artists have and how that can translate into negotiating agreements and doing things that are helpful to artists. Because in my vantage point as a lawyer who helps artists in negotiating agreements like this, I often see what I view as this power disparity between the galleries and the artists. If an artist has an opportunity to work with a gallery, a lot of times the artist might have to give up, you know, things that they really want, things that are really important to them because they really want to work with that gallery. And I think the galleries have a lot of power. They can say, listen, you know, I don't really need to work with this artist. I have 5 other artists I can work with. If you're not willing to give on this point, then, you know, I'll go somewhere else. I had a situation where I represented a sculptor in New York a few years ago, and he was an up-and-coming sculptor, and he had the opportunity to work with a gallery in New York that was very well respected. And I said to him, listen, you need to get a written contract if you're going to work with this gallery. And he agreed. So he went to the gallery owner and he tried to negotiate something. And the gallery owner said, I don't do written contracts. We're not going to do that. I only do handshake agreements. And so the artist said to me, this is a huge career opportunity. I want to work with this gallery. I have to do it. And so I said, I completely understand. So he did it, and he worked with the gallery. And everything was fine for a few years, but then lo and behold, 2 years later, they had a huge dispute that got very contentious over fabrication costs for the sculptures and whether that money was coming out of fees and sales proceeds that were paid to the gallery. So, you know, in my view, I just see this sort of power disparity that's difficult for artists to deal with. But when I was talking to Christine about it, I think she has a different view, and I kind of wanted to start there because I think, you know, your view is there isn't really a power disparity because you try to deal really fairly and transparently with all of your artists.
Well, yes. I mean, in my career, I have been trying to educate artists. So even though I am definitely on the dealer side, I really am compassionate for the artists who really are trying to get their career started. So I've been always fair on the distribution of the costs or on certain points that you can work around. I'm really surprised about no written contract. I have always done a written contract. And even if it's a consignment, I mean, it is built in, who pays for what are the terms, what are things that you can negotiate. And those are points we were talking earlier about the framing expenses. Those are framing expenses, shipping expenses, commissions, discount, you know, that you give to collectors or consultant. All of those are points that needs to be addressed on and written on paper, so there's no surprises. There are some issues that I can understand for artists who work with different mediums that are a little bit more complicated, but I now deal with artists who work in technology, so you can imagine the cost of you know, the screens and the computers and things like that. I think we are in a day and age now where that is built in as a medium as well, and so it should not be any different than a painter who is using his paint and his brushes, or a sculptor, or things like that. So any dealer who doesn't want a written contract, I would run away. Even if you are a good gallery.
Well,
I'm really surprised. I'm sorry. I'm really shocked.
Yeah. No, but from the other side, and I'm going to speak now as an artist, even though I've been a curator and the director of exhibitions in an art center. So I've worked on both sides of the line. But basically, I think the most important thing for an artist is to be clear about what you want, what you're willing to pay for that. And paying for it may be in any number of different things. And one might be relinquishing a written contract, but that there's certain things that you can do that are warm, fuzzy, and would not really have the same response in a dealer who doesn't want to follow with written contracts. So what I recommend always is to follow up with emails, really friendly, chatty emails. It was so great. I'm so excited about the show coming up. I just wanted to be clear about some of the things that we'd agreed upon. When you have a record and when you're writing regularly, where it's not one email coming out of the blue or one letter in the mail, then you have a different tone to your relationship. And I think that makes everyone just more comfortable in terms of being responsive and not just shutting down. So I think that at different stages in your career, you can expect different things. We're not all Chuck Close who can say, to the Met, this gallery D is not the one I wanted. I wanted gallery C. That's what you told me. And I'm going to pull my show out and have it at MoMA instead. We're not all there. And we have different expectations because we are at different stages in the work that we're doing and where it fits into a really very diverse arena. It's just a very different picture.
And Jan, I couldn't agree more, and that was something that I also tell artists is, if you're at the outset of a relationship with a gallery and they don't want to do a contract, I say just write an email and say, hey, this is what I understand our deal points to be. And if you don't agree with anything, write back and let me know. And then, if they write back and they say, this is what I agree, then, you can have a dialogue about it. And if they don't write back and then later there's a dispute, you can come back to that email and say, this was a contemporaneous email that we wrote at the time. This is what we understood the deal to be. So I think that's a really good point. So one of the things that we wanted to do is just go through sort of a template agreement and talk about some of the provisions that we see disputes coming from. So the first one is exclusivity. So legally there's sort of two things that go into exclusivity. You can either have a gallery that has an exclusive agency with an artist, or on the other hand, you can have exclusivity where the gallery has the exclusive power to sell works of art by that artist. And if it's just simply an exclusive agency, then the artist can sell a work of art directly and not have to pay a commission to the dealer or to the gallery. But if the gallery is given that exclusive power to sell, then anytime the artist sells a work of art, then they have to pay a commission to the dealer or the gallery. And I know, Jan, you've had some instances with this with studio sales, right?
Right. So again, I've had both just verbal agreements with galleries, and I've also had 5-page contracts, 7-page contracts that really spell out you cannot sell or show with any other gallery from the Oregon border to San Luis Obispo, midpoint through California. And I'm always very clear about studio sales. I have no problem with a percentage which is usually agreed upon and less than a sale that's made directly through the gallery, by the gallery. So even when we talk about studio sales, there are sales where a dealer will bring a potential collector to your studio, and there it's very clear that it's their sale. Then there's that kind of gray area, and it's really important, I feel, for artists to understand that if you're making a sale in your studio to someone you've known and been cultivating, you have to recognize that the fact that you are now with this gallery has really pushed that collector across the threshold and have them open up their checkbook and write that check. That there is a value to having that show and that relationship with the dealer, even if you don't see it directly and you've been cultivating a relationship. Sometimes it's that push, and you have to acknowledge that, I think, with a percentage. It's just part of the whole package because they're working all the time, and the things that they're doing don't necessarily show, on their ledger either. They're putting out time and energy, and they're putting out ads, and all of those things are affecting, if not the person who came in, maybe a friend of theirs who then spoke to them and they thought, oh, this is the time I better get that piece that I wanted to get. Mm-hmm. Wow. So
it's nice to hear. Because I have met a lot of artists who really thought, hey, it's my studio. I knew that person before, I worked with you, therefore it's my sale. That is probably the most case that it's happening a lot, where we really had to explain the artist that once we are creating this relationship, and it's like literally a marriage between two people, we are building your career, we are promoting your work. It may not be, as you said, clear and loud, but it is happening, and we're doing work all the time. And it's exactly the point that person you knew for 10 years who never paid and never pulled out the checkbook suddenly is doing it. There's a reason. And so even though it will not be, let's say, for argument's sake, a 50-50% split, I personally would be taking 25% of a studio sale. And I think it's really fair, and I'm glad you agree with that.
I'd give you 30.
You would do 30?
We should work together.
Okay.
Christine, when we were talking, you had some really interesting thoughts about the effect of social media on exclusivity with dealers and artists.
I haven't had a gallery, a physical space for the last 10 years, so I haven't had really the effect of social media, but it is very difficult to manage. So the social media obviously is another layer that you add on, depending also who is doing the social media. Is it the gallery or is it the artist? And I'm most likely sure that it is the artist, right? The artist Instagram account is more effective than a gallery, just because a collector want that close relationship directly with the artist. And this is what the gallery is fighting all the time. So the exclusivity, when I had the gallery and you were talking, from Seattle to San Luis Obispo, this is really clear that some galleries want to have exclusivity with some artists, maybe regional, like, we take care of the West Coast and another gallery takes care of the East Coast. And those are important. Because then it's a wild west. Anybody can sell anything. Nobody knows where it comes from. The sales tax issue that we were talking about. Some artists, if you're a collector from California and this artist is from California, if you go through the dealer in California, you're going to pay sales tax. But if that same artist has a representative in New York and you can directly go to New York and say, hey, I saw that piece, can you sell it to me? And therefore you don't pay the sales tax. So those are really little tricks that collectors are very familiar with, that galleries are trying to be really rigid about it. If it's a collector, obviously in the West Coast or in California, that is the dealer from California who should be handle that sale. But inventory moves and it travels, and so this is where it's a headache. This issue is really a headache for dealers.
Yeah.
So that's where the exclusivity, and I call it more territorial,
That's where I start talking to people about supporting California, schools, all those, that the whole infrastructure supported by sales tax, that if you love the art being made in California, it's because all of these California artists came through our great public art schools like UCLA, and there are reasons for sales tax, and they should support California.
I know, but when
it's very difficult. But I've
on $1,000
come down on
piece
this.
of art, it's okay. You can, you pay. But when you start talking about big numbers,
I was squealing on $100,000 piece of art that was being sold. I said I was squealing about this with $100,000 piece of art. Yeah.
Well, that's why it's important to have it in the contract and really spell it out, I think. So another issue that we always tell artists to put into the contract is the list of works of art that are being consigned and the time frame for the consignment. So what we tell people to do, our artists and our galleries, is to create sort of an addendum to the agreement that lists the works of art. It's just a very simple one-page document. It has the title, the medium, the description, the agreed upon retail price, and the consignment value. And this is important, and it's important to keep it up to date and make sure that if something's sold, you take it off the list. If an artist wants to put something else on consignment with the gallery, you add it to the list. So this is really important to make sure you have this spelled out. But then also the time frame within which you're consigning the work of art. So, you have to give the gallery enough time to feel like they have an incentive to promote your work of art. Even if you're an artist and you really only want to, be stuck to a gallery for 6 months or a year, you have to be able to give them that time. So Christine, do you have a view on what sort of the ideal time frame is?
Definitely a minimum of a year. I mean, when again, I mean, okay, again, to represent an artist and for a gallery to really be behind an artist, you have to test the work, you have to try the relationship. So the way I work, and I would say probably 80% of all the dealers, is that you take 1, 2, 3 works on consignment, you create a group exhibition, you test the work. That consignment, that contract, could be literally for the duration of the exhibition. So you take literally merchandise at this point, and then you are responsible for it for the time of the exhibition. If the artist is okay with it, and for example, it works really well, then you can extend it to a year. So for sure, a year minimum, because again, if you have this exhibition for, let's say, 5 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, you continue to work with that inventory, then you need to have it your responsibility, and not having an artist tell you, hey, I want my work back, and then, of course, if there was some interest, collectors are like, hey, a month or 2 months later, I'm interested in that piece. Oh, the piece is back to the artist, then you're losing the potential sale. So locking for the dealer, it's important to have the time to work with the inventory. So for sure, a 1 year term is definitely ideal.
And Jan, is that something that you would agree with?
Well, actually, I can't, because I think that we have many different situations, and galleries and artists both have calendars that go out sometimes 2 years in advance, and we know, so very often work coming in for a show is already committed, and so you just have to be clear. Again, I think communication is the most important factor here. You have to let the dealer know that certain works are going to be shown in another city on another exhibition that's on the heels of this one, and they won't be able to remain in the gallery afterwards. So it's really depends individually on the situation, the artwork, what you're showing where, and what part of the world. I mean, sometimes I'm just swooping in and taking it and getting on an airplane with it afterwards. But I will say that the most organized gallery that I had the pleasure of working with was actually run by another artist who'd had a lot of professional development training in her MFA program. And she was really great. In the end of every year, she sent a copy of the inventory with a little image. It's so easy with computers now. Yeah. She just printed it out every year and just stay in touch and know and talk about the work, offer to change some things out. Those are things that are always options.
I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, I have all the artists that I had worked with for 20 years. I can still talk to them right now, so I must have done something right. I mean, it's absolutely crucial to be clear, to say, hey, I would like to take that piece to swap it. This piece is going to an exhibition. Is it okay to swap? Obviously, if the piece hasn't sold and it's sitting in my racks, why not? Obviously, so. I think it's really important to talk and to be flexible and ask questions. Is it possible to do this? Is it possible to do that? I mean, ultimately, what we want is to sell. I mean, I think that's the goal. There is to build a reputation. To everybody makes money, and your prices are increasing, and everybody's happy. That's really the idea.
And I think the communication is really the key there, and that kind of leads into the next provision that I wanted to talk about, which is accountings and inventory. And so this is something where we see all of the disputes arise, really. I mean, this is 90% of the disputes. And so what we do is when we work with artists, we counsel them to try to get as much as they can out of the gallery. And so ideal situation is we get a gallery that agrees to give our artists a regular accounting of all of the works that have been sold. A quarterly basis is usually what we ask for. access to the books and records of the gallery, just for that artist. Of course, not for every single artist in the gallery, but for that artist specifically. And then number 3, access to the inventory that they have at the gallery at all times. And, you know, I had a situation where an artist was in New York and he hadn't talked to his gallery for 6 months. And then it turns out they had sold a number of works of art. He had no idea. And then the gallery said, well, we don't know when we can pay you. And it just becomes a horrible situation that I think everyone can avoid. And I know, Christine, you and I were talking about this earlier, and I don't think you necessarily agree with me, but it's probably because you're one of the honest art dealers out there. But you wouldn't open up your books and records to artists, would you?
I mean, on one hand, if I have nothing to hide, it's not an issue. I mean, so it never really occurred. Nobody ever told me, you know, I want to know how much you paid, how much you sold that work, because nowadays, first of all, you have to release the name of the collector. So if the artist had an issue with you, it would be very simple to call the collector and say, may I ask how much you paid for? So if an artist wants to know how much discount I have given, you know, have I given more discount than I should have? At the end of the day, I am absorbing the extra discount. So on paper, the artist, whatever the terms are, will get what he agreed to. And you know, like I said, if I were to give an extra 5 or 10%, I would take it out of my commission. So I have done that multiple times. I don't like to do it. You know, it's really to force a sale, but an artist I know needs money, and if I lose 10%, why not? It's not the end of the world. So I never had an artist, I want to see your books. You know, if an artist wants, for example, you know, we were talking about the framing, the artist pay for the frame. I don't ask him how much he paid for the frame. I just take his word. If it tells me that framing cost me $150, I'm giving you back your $150. I mean, I can do the same reverse,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Shipping charges, you know, I pay for shipping to return, or the artist pay for shipping on the way. I mean, we just accept, you know, the prices that are being told. But would I open my bank accounts to show how much I spent for an ad, for a catalog, for a trip, or things like that? Not necessarily. Yeah. I don't think anybody wants anybody to look at how you manage your money.
Right.
I mean, if everything is clear at the end, I don't see. When there's a dispute, I would imagine that's your recourse. But when everything is fine, I don't see why.
And have you had experiences with this, Jan?
I've never requested anything. I mean, I've had issues that have arisen where a check comes in the mail and then I go, this number is not right, and then there's been an exchange back and forth. And I mean, I've had a couple of unpleasant experiences where, oh, you know, we just didn't sell that much, and it's because I've been told, like, it wasn't like major work that you sent, it was like minor work, or, you know, and I go back and I look at installation shots and I go, oh, what a beautiful exhibition. What are they talking about? Or whatever reasons. I mean, there's all this changed bookkeeping that happens. It's happened to me. But for the most part, I don't want to become involved. You have to think about psychic energy too. And I don't want to become involved in that kind of exchange and wrangling. I like to focus on the fact that more people have my work now, and that it's being enjoyed, and that maybe that wouldn't have happened, that sale wouldn't have happened, and that sale wouldn't have happened had she not, like, reduced the price by more than we'd agreed on. And sometimes a dealer will absorb it, sometimes they don't want to. You know, it's I've had so many, you know, we're talking about 50 years here and a lot of different experiences. But I will say one thing that comes to mind is that if we all behave well, we don't need these kinds of things. So, I mean, I've had collectors who've come to me at the end of an exhibition. They come to me personally, and they ask if I'll take half for the work because it's not in the gallery right now. And I'll say, no, I won't do it. And I had this one collector say, I didn't think you would. And he paid the whole thing, and I sent a check to the gallery, even though it was like a week after the show closed. I mean, this is like really just bad behavior. And I think if we all behave well with each other, we don't have those kinds of problems.
And this is, again, when we were talking about the galleries are frankly not always the bad ones. No, the collectors are terrible too. Yeah. They really are trying to buy behind your back. There's no doubt about it that a collector, most motivation is to pay as less as possible. And whatever it's going to be to go straight to the artist or to buy to another gallery to avoid the sales tax or who knows what they can come up with, they will. So, galleries are trying their best to keep track of everything, where is what. And I think that's why it's very important to have everything on paper. I mean, to this day, the gallery I work, by the director is been closed for 10 years. Believe it or not, I still have the records.
Oh my gosh.
Of every single consignment.
Good for you.
Every single paperwork that the artist picked up the work.
Wow.
So this is extremely important to keep that.
So work with Christine is the...
And there's so many more good gallery out there. I mean, not everybody is malicious in using, something so personal from an artist to make money off.
Yeah,
it's awful. I'm sorry.
I don't think that it's malicious. I think that we often want to do things and they don't work out, or we want to please someone, so we say that we can do something that we can't actually deliver on. There are a lot of different reasons that people get into a jam. I don't think, for the most part, that anyone is being malicious.
You're very kind, but I don't think a gallery that doesn't pay his artist on the work that he sold is not malicious. I mean, it is. I mean, you sold something, you need to pay the artist. I mean, there's no... I can't imagine why you would not do that, even if you caught into the cycle of having bills to pay and things like that. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I never not paid anybody. Have I been always on time? Within the 30 days? No, maybe not. But going from being 2 weeks late or 30 days late or something and not pay at all. It's a big difference. Yeah. as the way you run your business. I mean, and the word travels really fast anyway. So I have still to this day artists who are calling me saying, because I don't represent anymore, I don't have a space, right? So a lot of artists have been trying to find other galleries, and they're asking me, have you heard anything? No? Oh yes.
So the last provision that I want to touch on, which I think goes kind of to your point of things just going awry, I have a nice story here on this one, is insurance, which is usually sort of a dry subject. So there's no law that expressly requires a gallery to maintain insurance. And so for that reason, sometimes galleries don't. And so we, of course, counsel all of our artist clients to make sure that there's a provision in the contract that says that there is insurance at the gallery. Usually they maintain insurance at about 40 to 70% of the sales price of a work of art. And in an ideal situation, which normally doesn't happen, the artist would be named as the beneficiary on an insurance policy. But I had a case last year that kind of highlights the problems that happen when there's no insurance or minimal insurance. And that was, I had a client who was the good friend of a pretty well-known artist, and he had been gifted a piece by this artist, and he decided that he wanted to sell it. So he found a gallery that specialized in works by this artist, and he took it to the gallery. And my client, for whatever reason, had never had insurance on the piece. He knows that he should have, but he just never got around to it. He never did it. So he takes it to this gallery. The gallery owner looks at it for 15 minutes. I mean, I have a video of this gallery owner looking at it. He puts on these special magnifying glasses that you probably know more about than I do. And he says, this is in excellent condition. It looks great. I think I can sell it for $350,000. And he says, I have this private sale going on in Carmel. In a few months, I'll put it in that sale, and we'll see what happens. So my client says, that sounds great. He consigns the work to the gallery. And the gallery says, I have insurance on this, so don't worry about it. So my client was happy because he didn't have the insurance, and so he wanted to make sure that he was giving it to a place that had insurance if something were to happen. So then a few months later, he gets an email, my client gets an email from the gallery owner that says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I took your piece to the restorer. It turns out there was a big scratch in the middle of it that I didn't see initially. And I tried to fix it, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to fix it. And now it's only worth $225,000. So my client was completely distraught. So that's when he called me. We went to the restorer to look at the piece. And of course, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but I could see a big scratch in the middle of the piece. And so I said to the restorer, what kind of insurance do you guys have here? And he told me, and it was completely inadequate. It would have covered maybe $5,000 worth of damage. So then I said to the lawyer for the gallery, I said, let me see your policy. What kind of insurance do you have? And they wouldn't give me the policy. So now we're in a place where we don't trust anyone. We don't trust the restorer. We don't trust the gallery owner. We have no insurance. You guys live in California. We have wildfires all the time. We have earthquakes all the time. So we didn't know what to do. And my client couldn't get insurance because the piece isn't in his possession. And now there's a huge scratch in it. But luckily, we were able to negotiate a really good settlement with the gallery quickly. So all of those considerations fell away. But it was a really scary situation. And I think it highlights that when you're an artist and you're giving works of art or consigning works of art to a gallery, you need to think about, not only does the gallery have insurance, but does that insurance cover transit to and from the gallery? What if the gallery's loaning it somewhere else to be exhibited somewhere else? Does that other gallery have insurance? Just knowing that there's insurance is not enough. You have to ask a lot more questions. So, have you had experiences with this?
I've had so many experiences. On the side of the institution, when I picked up a piece of artwork worth $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000, I had an insurance certificate in my hand for the collector. It went from the minute it was in my hand, the minute I took it off the wall, before I even bubble wrapped it, it was my responsibility. Unless sometimes collectors want to keep it on the policy, on their own policy, and they want to decline your insurance, and they just want to keep everything. They don't want things going on and coming off. But that's very rare. I mean, considering all the artwork that I borrowed. So there's that insurance certificate. And what is common, I wouldn't say, is to insure at 40 or 50 or 60%. It's not that. It's you carry a certain amount because you don't expect to have every piece in the exhibition wiped out at once. You're not insuring each piece individually. You have an entire object list and a value there, and it's all listed. So you're not necessarily insuring for everything in the building at that moment, because if everything's gone, you're gone too, and that's sort of the end. But I have had work that has, I've been called by the transport company, Jan, you have to come here and see this. We just opened the crate, and there are punctures through your painting. And but the institution paid for the most fabulous restoration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it was taken care of. So you have to really, you have to know who's handling your work. Well, because when it comes down to it, it's not just about the restoration.
And that's why it goes back to this consignment that I still have 10 years later. Because as a business, for sure, I always had insurance policy, usually up to $1 million. And so what it means is that every time you are dropping artwork with a consignment that shows a retail price and a date, automatically that paper is added to my policy. So I don't have to call my insurance and, I got a $5,000 work in, but within $1 million, and then you move in and out of your inventory. Most of the galleries also do have in transit. That's what we had as well. So the moment the work arrives in the gallery, or sometime if it's in transit and I'm paying for the shipping, it's covered under my policy. When it leaves the gallery, and that's why I have those consignments with the artist's signature that it picked it up, it's being removed. So, at the time I was in Los Angeles, we went through the earthquake. And so luckily I had also earthquake insurance. So we lost thousands and thousands of dollars worth of art. We were used to represent David Gilhooly.
Oh.
So we had insurance. So I cannot again imagine having a business without carrying an insurance. I mean, it's just a flood. I mean, you could have so many things. An opening, somebody, scratching a painting, or somebody, damaging, or you send. I had also packages coming with, forklift through it in crates and things like that. So, I can't imagine, unless, I don't know how you would repay the artist, how you compensate for the loss. I mean, somebody needs to pay for that loss. And so if the gallery wants to take the loss, the 50% loss, and pay the artist, great. But it's a risk that you can do if you do, $1,000 print here and there. But when you start to talk about big numbers in the 6 digits, I want to sleep at night. I don't want to deal with that. So
Right.
Insurance is absolutely essential. I'm shipping an exhibition next week to Santa Fe. Right away, all my consignment, are stating that once it leaves my hands, the gallery in Santa Fe is responsible during, shipment, and they confirm that they have insurance at the moment it's in transit. So super important.
I think for an artist, it's good just to have a checklist and make sure that you've covered all these things. Just go over it all the time, because it's as easy as forgetting milk when you go to the market, and that's the one thing you needed. It's really simple, just a checklist.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So stepping away from contracts for a second, the next sort of right that artists have that I want to talk about is from a statute in California. So as you all probably know, about 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of big galleries went under. They all declared bankruptcy. And because of that, a lot of states in the country established statutes that kind of gave baseline protection to artists when they consign works of art to galleries, including California. So in California, that's codified as Civil Code Sections 1738.5 and 1738.6. And basically what this says is when an artist delivers a work of fine art to a gallery, that's deemed a consignment. And a consignment means that the gallery must hold that property in trust for the artist, and the gallery must hold any sales proceeds in trust for the artist. So it's essentially giving the gallery and the artist a fiduciary relationship. And so what does that mean in this context? It means that the gallery must care for the art prudently, it must deal with the artist fairly and honestly, it must account periodically to the artist, and it must disclose to the artist all relevant information. And so ways in which I've seen this play out when artists aren't really being dealt with fairly are 2 situations that come to mind. One where I sell Christine's work of art to a collector for $10,000, and then instead of giving Christine her money back, I give it to Jan because I owe her the money. So what the statute says is that the galleries must hold that money that I got for Christine in trust for Christine, and it's her money. I can't give it to anyone else. And that happens all the time, unfortunately. And then the second situation where this plays out is where I say to Jan, I love that work of art that you created. I want to buy it directly for $50,000. And what I didn't tell Jan is that I have a deal with Christine to sell it to her for $200,000. So things like that are just absolutely unacceptable, and they're a violation of the law. And you could easily go to court and bring a claim against a gallery for something like that. Whether or not artists do is a different story. But Jan, have you had issues where you felt like you weren't dealt with in a fiduciary relationship with a gallery?
This is a hard one, because one also hopes as an artist that one has the kind of support of a dealer that they're going to buy out of every show for themselves. So there is that expectation, and there is the expectation that they're investing in you in the beginning, and then later they've got something sort of at hand that they can sell and realize some kind of a profit on that kind of blind faith investment that they've made initially. So it becomes a little gray in that part of the history that you develop with a gallery where that's something you should expect, I think. And I think that's sort of a healthy kind of relationship. And that's very different than somebody just flipping your work without you knowing. So I would think it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because it may be that, they've had work from 10 years ago and now you're really hot. In fact, this was proposed at there's an annual conference in Barcelona of art dealers, and they call it Talking Galleries. And one of the issues for dealers is they work and build up an artist, and then the artist goes to a larger gallery, and they kind of leave them after all that work has been invested. And so one of the questions and one of the things that came up in conversation amongst these dealers was to negotiate so that when they leave, that you're involved in purchasing and selling and participating in sales that follow during a certain period. So these get very complex, and probably you would want to, you've probably had this experience, right? You
Yes.
invest in an artist and then they're hot.
Being specialized in emerging artists, I won't say any names, obviously, but it's called being burned, literally, when you build a career for an artist over, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and suddenly they're telling you, thank you, now I'm going there. That's brutal when it happens. I never heard the other gallery calling me say, hey, would you like now a share of that, of that artist? I can assure you that does not happen. Nor the artist tells you, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm making much more money now, thank you, would you like a piece of it? Never happens. So the flipping side, I've been involved in contemporary Chinese art, so I really am fully aware of the idea of buying work and then, selling it for more later. I would never buy a piece of art from an artist knowingly that I can flip it 2 weeks later for 3 times. Same thing. This is not something that I would do. Did we buy inventory and sat on it for 10 years and then it happens that the market goes up like a stock? At a certain point, you have to understand that the art market is really no different than the stock market. That's the goal, right? So yes, that does happen. Does the artist get a share of it? No, because I bought the work, hoping, but not knowingly, knowing that the work would appreciate. I've worked with a lot of artists in China, and I've actually explained to Chinese who are really much more interested in buying because they want the cash. And I've told a lot of artists, what do you want? Do you want me to give you $10,000 now, and then indeed I can do whatever I want with the work? Or do you want you and we work, and we're going to try to make the work worth 30, 40, 50,000, hopefully, within a year, and I give you 50% of that. That's a gamble that the artist has to decide. I can, I'm confident either way. Some artists did flip. Some Chinese artists understood that, okay, if I'm a little bit patient, but yes, I'm taking the risk of working with somebody who's going to hold my work, who I don't know because I'm all the way in Beijing and she's here, but I can make 2, 3, 4 times more. Some did, and some are like, no, I'm taking my 10,000 and that's it.
Yeah.
So those are two different ways of doing business. But you have to have a very solid relationship. You have to really know who you're working with, I think.
So another aspect of the statute that I just wanted to point out to everyone is in section B, 1738.6b here, and this says that if an artist consigns a work of art to a gallery, it shall not be subject to a claim of a creditor of the consignee. And so that's a really important provision. So what that says is, if an artist consigns a work of art to a gallery, it's not subject to claims of the gallery's creditors or investors. And so you guys probably all know this, but many galleries have creditors and investors, and I had a case about 2 years ago where I represented a man who had invested $3 million in a Palm Springs art gallery, And in return, he took a security interest in all of the works of art in the gallery, which means if the gallery owner defaults, then he gets all the works of art. And indeed, that's what happened. The gallery owner defaulted. And so my client was entitled to all of these works of art. And of course, the gallery owner immediately started selling everything he could at fire sale-like prices to anyone who would buy them. There was one instance that was probably the most memorable where the gallery owner sold a Georgia O'Keeffe piece to someone for a very low price. And normally in a gallery, they'll when someone buys something, they'll print out a nice invoice with an image of the work of art and the sales price and the sales tax and any discounts. Here, the gallery owner hand wrote an invoice. It was total chicken scratch. You could barely read it. And in return, the purchaser actually didn't even provide cash or a check or pay with a credit card. He went to his local bank, got a cashier's check, and made that cashier's check out to the gallery's landlord and paid the rent for the month for the gallery in return. So we had to sue the purchaser, we had to sue the gallery owner. But where this comes into play is that when I went with my client to go look at the inventory of the gallery to figure out what we could take, we had to be very careful that we didn't take anything that had been consigned by an artist because we weren't entitled to that. And we even went so far as to, in situations where the gallery owner had done these fire sale like sales to people that were works of art that had been consigned by artists, we would call the purchasers and say, hey, this is the situation, you should really do the right thing and give it back to the artist. So it's a nice sort of safety net for artists because it allows them to have protection from creditors and from investors, even though there's no contract there. So this is a really, really important provision. And I know you never really work with investors or creditors. Was that a conscious decision on your part?
Yeah, I mean, I always work. The two people that I worked with and for were private parties, and like you buy what you can pay, and if you can't pay it, you don't buy it and you don't spend it. I mean, do you anticipate? Do you bank on some sales that will happen? Sure, I think after a certain 10 years in the business and you work for 10 years with this artist, you are aware that you can sell that much. So do you spend a little ahead of it? Sure. But I never worked with the backers. I think that's in the business we call them like backers. Where when somebody, what you describe, puts money up front and then participate, hopefully in the gross sales, and then you get a percentage and things like that. But I never personally dealt with that, so it's the safest way. But no experience.
Okay. No. So this is what this is like word of advice that's coming. Be nice to everyone working in the galleries. So get to know everyone working in the gallery, not just the dealer. Be really nice, because one day you may get a phone call from the gallerista and she's going to say, Jan, things are going down here really soon, and your work will only get to you if it gets shipped out right now, today. And that's happened, and the work got to me from Texas. It got, she just was so nice, just because, I don't know, because I respected her and was nice to her and talked to her regularly. And she herself got the stuff crated, shipped, and sent to me. And I got all these paintings back.
That's a great piece of advice.
But the gallery was shut down, all that stuff. It doesn't matter if you're going to get it eventually to be tied up legally for all of that. You don't want that. You just want to be nice to everyone and have relationships with everyone so they know who you are. Because if she hadn't known me, she may have had time to make one phone call and to ship up, work from one person.
I would say that as an independent curator now, so I do have to rely on people's space and on other businesses. I did have an instance that was different, just because actually the person who was hosting the exhibition was going through a divorce, and the husband decided to take over the business. So she did indeed call me, say, I think you better come and pick up all the work because he's going to seal everything for that. But yes, I totally agree be nice to everybody, the gallery assistant, the preparator, everybody. They are here to work on your behalf. They love what they're doing, hopefully. And when instance comes like that, they'll be your best friend. So it's always important to respect everybody who works there. They're making the gallery functioning and your work and your exhibition the best presentation they can and supporting. So it's very important.
So the last topic that we wanted to cover was copyrights. So maybe Christine, can you just kind of speak to how you dealt with copyrights with your artists when you had a gallery?
Well, it's very straightforward. I mean, for me, maybe I'm wrong because you're the lawyer, you know more, but the artist retains the copyright, period. It doesn't matter if I sold it, if somebody else bought it. I had this instance, I think it was a kind of a game I was telling Kimberly about this collector who really tried to push me really hard. He bought a painting and said, so now I can do whatever I want with that painting. I can make prints, I can make posters, I can. And I say, I was flabbergasted because he really was a long-time collector. And I'm like, no, you cannot. You do not do that. He said, yes, I can. And he really pushed and pushed and pushed. And I'm like, do not do that, otherwise we will not be friends again. And I kept literally pulling, law sections on everything. I said, no, you cannot. He never did. But I believe it's people are not aware that it's not because you own the painting that you own the rights to do whatever you want with the image. So even if an artist were to sell that painting, and it did happen, we had one artist, that painting was fabulous, everybody wanted it, the collector had bought it, and the artist, therefore, and the gallery, myself, decided to do a print edition out of it. We did ask permission as a courtesy to the collector, and we did inform him, but frankly, we would not even had to, and we did it, we did a print series, but so be aware that what you created is yours forever, and you can do whatever you want with it, even though it's part of a collection. That's my understanding.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Okay, good.
And so, Jan, would you have specific conversations with galleries about your copyright when you would exhibit with them?
Well, first of all, there are so many issues where where you want them, and they are entitled to use the images for promotion for the exhibition, for educational programs. You want images to go out to people who are teaching and lecturing. You want your images out there. You want people to have them. And so what you want to do is control the resolution, what they can do with them, how they can print. I do know it's very nice that you speak to the collector about reproduction of an image, because I know a collector who was really upset when her Diebenkorn she was happy to lend it, but then it was being reproduced in a little kiosk. You could just buy reproductions, and printing is so incredible now with great color and everything. And she felt that, nobody had consulted her. Who would consult any of the people who have the Diebenkorns? But that happens a lot. So I think what we have to recognize is that whatever the reproduction, however it's being used, it is not the same as the original work. And that if you have the work, you have something really special, and you're lucky to have it. It's unique in that sense. But what I think is really important for artists is the issue of appropriation, and the fact, what is fair use, what constitutes fair use, and how can your work, particularly when it's out there being taken and having work that's derivative versus work that's transformative. I think those are issues that artists are really having to confront in terms of artwork.
But I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, because what I think the misconception is that when a collector buys a painting, it's his only, right? But what you have to understand is that for the value to go up is that image has to be seen. It has to be used. I mean, more that image will be reproduced in catalogs, in museums, or on teacups, or on bags, or on posters. That's what's going to drive the value of that particular artwork. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of collectors are not aware of that actually it's things that are derivative, yes, misuse, absolutely. But more the artwork is being reproduced, that will increase the value of the work. So you want actually that. Yeah. And I think people don't realize that. They think that because it's unique, it belongs only to them, and that's the way it should be. But that's not what's going to drive the market value of that work. So
I just wanted to end by telling you guys a little bit about some lawsuits that have been pretty prominent lately in the last 6 months or a year regarding copyright infringement and graffiti art. So this is a lawsuit, well, this Instagram post spawned a lawsuit actually by an artist named Adrian Faulkner. This is a parking garage in Detroit, Michigan. And as you can see, there's a Cadillac parked next to it, and then there's an Instagram post promoting this Cadillac. So the artist sued Cadillac for this, sued GM, I should say, and argued that this is copyright infringement and he should have been asked, it should have been licensed, he should have been paid for it. And GM had a really novel argument that they made, and that was, well, this work of art actually isn't entitled to copyright protection because it's part of an architectural work. It's part of a parking garage. It's part of a structure. So it's not entitled to its own specific standalone protection. And so the court analyzed this issue. There was a court in LA about a year ago, and the court asked questions like, well, did the artist work with an integrated concept with the person who created the parking garage? Was there some sort of functional component that the mural added to the parking garage? Was it all supposed to be part of one concept? And the court said, no, I don't think so. The court said, this is very different. The parking garage was created well before the mural was. It's very different. These are two separate things. So the court said this is entitled to copyright protection. And this is really important for artists because I think this was the first decision from a court that said these types of murals are entitled to protection. And so the case settled pretty soon afterwards. But then just 2 months ago, actually, Mercedes-Benz did the same thing, also in Detroit. I don't know why all this stuff keeps happening in Detroit. But there was another mural in Detroit, and Mercedes took this picture. They promoted this car on Instagram and Twitter and other places. And the artist started sending cease and desist letters to Mercedes. And Mercedes took the very aggressive approach of actually suing the artist, which we don't see very often. And they're kind of making the same argument that GM made. They're saying, well, this is actually part of an architectural project. This is part of the Detroit cityscape. I don't know. I don't think that argument's going to work because, obviously the cityscape was there well before the mural was. It just doesn't make sense that the artist was making this part of the cityscape. But then, as to Jan's point, they're actually also arguing that this is transformative. They're saying, well, we kind of blurred the image, so it's a different piece. It's transformative, which I also don't really think will work. But I think it's important for artists to know when they do these murals, there is protection. And, I don't think artists always want to bring lawsuits, but it's important to know that this is actually something that courts are being very sympathetic to in this recent legal climate.
I'm being the devil's advocate here. Do they think GM or Cadillac is that because it's in the public, they think it belongs to, it falls into the public domain?
Well, they're profiting off of this, so I think that makes it a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think if the artist were to put like an Instagram hashtag on the mural such that it made it seem like the artist wanted people to promote it, that might be different, but I don't think that was the intent here.
To play devil's advocate, I would say if we had a pop star who was making a music video in front of a mural, an artist would not necessarily be so quick to sue or to take objection. They might well feel that that it's glorifying, it's good for the art. But I'm saying sometimes yes and sometimes no, and it really depends upon how it can be read either way, is what I'm saying.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Can I just ask, just specifically this one, was this a commissioned mural or is this it graffiti?
That's a good question. It's a commissioned mural.
Yeah, it's a commission.
Both of these were actually.
Commissioner, who commissioned and don't they step in to protect the artist?
It's an artist foundation, and I think they're providing the legal defense. Yeah. So anyway, I think our time's up, but we'll be around if there are questions. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.